On the morning of July 16th, 1999, John F. Kennedy Jr. kissed his wife, Carolyn Bessette, goodbye after making up after a fight they had previously. By that night, both of their bodies would be at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. The year's 1963. A little boy saluted his father's casket as they laid him to rest, his mom Jackie standing beside him. All eyes on one of the world's most public families, and the entire world would now watch that little boy, John F. Kennedy Jr., grow up before their eyes, because his role in America's most legendary political dynasty had now begun. By the late 1980s, John F. Kennedy Jr. wasn't only the most famous man in America, he was American royalty and the world's most eligible bachelor. His entire life, he had grown up carrying around this pressure to carry on his father's legacy, given that now he wasn't only the son of a former president, but the world looked at him almost like a royal son to all of them, to the millions of people watching. There was a very specific media fixation with the Kennedy family overall, but especially with John F. Kennedy Jr. There was a moment in 1988 when he was 27 years old where he's standing in front of the podium talking about his uncle and his father. And even though at the time he was still in law school, he was in no sort of political office, only pretty much being famous for being JFK's son, that moment captures everything you need to know about the kind of person that he was. The crowd was going absolutely wild. Women are screaming, cameras are flashing, he's standing there speaking with this sort of confidence and warmth. That was who John F. Kennedy Jr. was, and the public went crazy over him. It was a few months after that People magazine named him the sexiest man alive, selling more copies of that issue than that magazine ever had. John F. Kennedy Jr. failed the bar exam twice after graduating from law school in 1989. He passed the third time, but eventually quit law and launched a political magazine called George, speculating rumors of him possibly running for office. And for as much as he was in the public eye, he didn't necessarily speak publicly too much, so there was this sort of mystery to him that only drew people into him more. And one of the biggest mysteries about him that intrigued people the most was his love life. Before meeting Carolyn Bessette, he dated some of the biggest names in the decade, including Madonna, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Cindy Crawford. But the ex-girlfriend that people remember the most is actress Daryl Hannah. The two of them met briefly in their teenage years, but it wasn't until they met again in 1988 at a wedding that their relationship really began, and the two of them were in an off and on relationship for the next 5 years. But it was in the year 1992 that everything changed when John F. Kennedy Jr. walked into a fitting room at Calvin Klein. Standing there waiting to help him was a 26-year-old publicist with blonde hair, piercing blue eyes. Her name was Carolyn Bessette. Carolyn Bessette was born in New York. She was the youngest of 3 daughters, and when she was so young, her parents got divorced. She moved with her mother and her older twin sisters, Lauren and Lisa, to Connecticut. In high school, classmates voted her the ultimate beautiful person in the yearbook, and she was just the kind of girl that you would see walking down the street and then never be able to forget her. But she wasn't only pretty, she was smart, she was ambitious, she was magnetic. Carolyn enrolled at Boston University to study education. She briefly tried modeling and even appeared on a cover of a student calendar called The Girls That Be You. But after graduation in 1988, she kind of took a different path, promoting nightclubs in Boston. It sounds random, but that job taught Carolyn how to work a room, how to read people, how to make someone feel special, how to get random strangers to trust her. And then in 1989, at 23 years old, she was hired as a saleswoman at Calvin Klein's boutique in Boston. A Calvin Klein executive noticed Carolyn's grace, her style, her presence, and she really liked what she saw. Because of that, she was transferred to the company's Manhattan headquarters and given a prestigious role, dressing VIP clients. Celebrities like Diane Sawyer trusted Carolyn to style them. A former Calvin Klein VP said, quote, she would tell them what looked good on them and advise them on how to put it all together. She sold millions of dollars of clothes over a period of time. Carolyn's style was impeccable, minimalist, timeless, effortless. She gives off very clean girl vibes, wearing Prada, simple black suits, Levi jeans, simple white shirts. She became Calvin Klein's director of publicity, then director of show productions. She also had a little thing going on with a Calvin Klein male model, and things could not be going any better for her if she tried. She's so clean girl, but she's also so cool girl. I'm obsessed with her. And she was 26 years old when she met the most famous man in America. John F. Kennedy Jr. was good friends with designer Calvin Klein, and he often wore his clothing. So that day he came in for a fitting, and Carolyn was the person assigned to help him, and their connection was pretty much immediate. Apparently he asked her for her phone number that first day after meeting, and then he invited her to join him at a gala with a group. But when Carolyn went, John was sitting with a different woman pretty much the entire night, so the two of them hardly talked. Later that same year, they saw each other at a different event, and that night they were seen together in deep conversation, talking for over an hour. Regardless, when they first met, John was still in this situationship, I guess relationship, I mean it was 5 years, but he was still with Daryl Hannah. Carolyn was kind of still seeing that male model, so it almost felt like the right person, wrong time. She and John broke up officially in 1994, around the same time that John's mother, Jackie, passed away from cancer. And this was very tough on him because he adored his mother. Shortly after Jackie passed was when him and Carolyn began dating, but dating JFK Jr., came with a price. Carolyn Bessette had been a very private girl her entire life, but now she was dating American royalty. The paparazzi were relentless. They were camping outside of her apartment. They were following her to work, to dinner, to the gym. Every outfit that she wore was making headlines. Every argument that she had with John was being photographed. Carolyn told a friend of hers that the only way to avoid the paparazzi was to leave her apartment early in the morning before they were able to get there. She complained to friends that she couldn't do a thing without it being reported on, and that even if her and John went somewhere where they thought they were alone when they couldn't see anyone, the next day they would see a picture of them on the paper, and to Carolyn, it felt really suffocating. She didn't like it, she didn't want it, she didn't do interviews because of it. In fact, she kind of saw fame as a thief of joy, but despite the chaos, John and Carolyn were falling in love. After they had been dating for a year, John invited Carolyn to go fishing in Martha's Vineyard over the 4th of July weekend, and he ended up proposing to her while the two of them were out on the boat, and Carolyn said, I'll think about it. Didn't give him an answer for 3 weeks, slay. But eventually she agreed to marry him. John and Carolyn then decided that they were going to be planning a wedding that was going to be secret. It was going to be secret and very carefully orchestrated and planned out, so not a single reporter found out until after it happened. And they succeeded at that. On a Saturday evening in September of 1996 in Cumberland, Georgia, John and Carolyn gathered with around 40 guests, just family and close friends, no press, no paparazzi, no cameras, except for one official photographer, and then they got married. Carolyn wore a pearl white silk gown designed by Narcisco Rodriguez. She wore it with no jewelry except for her engagement ring. The ceremony was intimate. It was beautiful. Carolyn looked like a movie star. John looked like he had won the lottery. But still, no matter how dreamy their life looked, there was always the constant of them being a very much public couple. And after the wedding, the media scrutiny that they were facing got to a whole nother level. Because Carolyn wanted privacy, she always declined interviews. She never wanted to talk. So she would be reported on as if she was this cold, mean, rude person. The press turned on her and painted her out in a negative light, so much so that John then made a statement addressing this, saying that this kind of fame would be a lot to anyone, let alone someone who isn't used to it, who didn't grow up with it. So he asked the press to give his wife privacy, saying that it would be greatly appreciated. But naturally, all the things, all the noise, rumors about infidelity, disagreements about certain things, and everything being on headlines daily, it affected their marriage. And a big thing that they apparently disagreed on was children. Because under the spotlight, Carolyn felt like she was living in a fishbowl, constantly being watched, and she didn't love it, as we know. She wasn't comfortable, let alone the thought of bringing a child into this world, into a world that she didn't even feel comfortable in. She didn't want to do that, but John, on the other hand, was ready to have kids, so it was a rough patch for them, to say the least. And reportedly, the two of them began attending couples counseling in the spring of 1999. Someone close to John stated, quote, both wanted to improve their marriage. John didn't want to be one of those Kennedy men who didn't care about how his wife feels, end quote. Then came July 16th of 1999. The year prior, John had gotten his pilot's license, and he had bought himself a Piper Saratoga, I think that's how you pronounce it. It's a high-performance single-engine plane, just 3 months before that July night. He was certified to fly under visual flight rules, meaning that he could only fly when the weather conditions were good and when he could see landmarks, but that night they were not. It was extremely hazy outside. John was flying the plane, and Carolyn was also there along with her older sister Lauren. They were flying to a family wedding. Apparently, a couple of days before, July 14th, Carolyn's sister Lauren had lunch with both of them because she was worried about the rocky path that they were in. So she was like, look, let's all fly to the wedding this weekend together. It'll be fun. You two can make up and just take a moment to breathe. John and Carolyn were like, okay, yeah, that would be cool, let's go. So July 16th was supposed to be a kiss and makeup situation. Friends said that John and Carolyn had made up over the phone that morning, and they were looking forward to spending the weekend together. But they never made it. Around 6:30 p.m. that night, John and Lauren left to go to the airport. Carolyn met them there. At 8:38 p.m., the FFA cleared the plane for takeoff. John was in the pilot seat. Carolyn and Lauren sat behind him, back to back with his seat. The flight should have taken 45 minutes, but conditions were not good and visibility was dropping by the minute. John lost visual reference points. Everything felt like it disappeared into the darkness. He couldn't tell up from down. It's called spatial disorientation, when pilots lose sense of the position and movement that they're in. And John, although he was licensed, he wasn't experienced, and he couldn't save them. At 9:41 p.m., the plane crashed into the Atlantic Ocean, approximately 7.5 miles west of Martha's Vineyard. All three of them passed on impact. When the plane didn't arrive, obviously friends and family members were concerned. By 4 a.m., the Coast Guard began searching. By 7:30 a.m., the Air Force and Coast Guard had launched 20 aircrafts and 2 boats. That afternoon, something washed up on shore. It was a headrest from the plane in a black suitcase containing Lauren's business card. The family wedding they were supposed to be attending got canceled, and an extensive search occurred. discovered. On July 21st of 1999, Navy divers discovered the bodies. It was said that all three of them were still strapped onto their seats. John F. Kennedy Jr. was 38 years old, Carolyn Bessette Kennedy was 33 years old, and her sister Lauren was 34. The next day, the Kennedy and Bessette families scattered their ashes at sea in a private ceremony. When the investigation was completed, it was ruled that the probable cause of the accident was, quote, the pilot's failure to maintain control of the airplane during a descent over water at night, which was a result of spatial disorientation, end quote. For Americans who remembered what happened to JFK, it felt like history was repeating itself, and like the Kennedy curse had claimed yet another generation. It's really a sad story, and the Kennedy curse itself is a whole thing. Maybe I'll do a podcast episode on that. I know there's a show that just came out, I think, about this. I haven't watched the show, but I'm going to tonight. However, I have seen it all over my For You page, which is why I'm doing this video. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this case. That is all from me today. Thank you for spending time with me. Hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.